Perfect prospect pairings. Miami quarterback Cam Ward will be a perfect fit with Brian Daboll, Malik Neighbors, and Jalen Hyatt in the Big Apple for the New York Giants. I'm going to explain this to Keith and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. And you know, I got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at the Talent Code. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, where we bring you championship level content each and every single day, man. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. Every listen is greatly appreciated here over at Locked On NFL Draft. For today's show, perfect pairing. We're picking a prospect, we're picking a team, and we're saying this must happen, right? So DP is coming to the table with a prospect and team. I'm coming to the table with a prospect and a team. We're going to talk about that. Then we have the biggest draft storylines. Is it quarterbacks? Is it wide receivers? Is it that we just don't really know at all? We're going to talk about what the biggest storyline is so far through the 2025 NFL draft, but 2024 college football season. And then we're going to wrap this thing up like I always say, man. My favorite segment, my name's not on it, right? Dames, dudes, I'm putting DP on a hot seat. We're going to talk about some of these prospects, see if they get in the club or if they kicked out the club. DP, perfect pairing. Let's kick this thing off.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Perfect prospect pairings. Keith, I have to go looking at the teams that are in the bottom of the draft right now. Cleveland Browns, the New England Patriots, Carolina Panthers, all tied with 1 win and 6 losses. And you have the Las Vegas Raiders with they are 2-5. The New York Jets are 2-5. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 2-5. The Orleans Saints are 2-5, but also the the New York Giants are also 2-5. And that's where I'm going, Keith. The New York Giants, my perfect pairing for them is Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. When you have all of the tools and the pieces they have offensively, I just look at it from an aspect of with Brian Daboll, he's used to big arm quarterbacks. He's used to guys that can do things that a lot of quarterbacks can't do. And we watched Daniel Jones. And one thing about it is like, okay, when Daniel Jones is playing confident, effective, it looks okay, right? It looks all right. Like, it doesn't look to his draft, position into the $40 million price tag, but it looks solid, right? It looks like he could be a solid starter if he did this game in and game out. But the mental aspect of the game of like, okay, where is he mentally consistently? That's always been a problem. I don't see that, and I haven't seen that with Cam Ward. Like, I'm watching a guy with bodies around him navigate the pocket with just a level of. So I remember somebody told me, he was like, man, if he comes off so arrogant in the pocket, like he's not flustered, even when he gets flushed out of the pocket, he's still playing with poise and calmness. And when you have the arm talent, and again, I always go back to the fact that Daniel Jones is not pushing the ball down the field. He's not attacking the vertical plane. You got explosive weapons in this offense. Jalen Hyatt, Malik Neighbors, Theo Johnson. Let's get some air yards. Your A-dot shouldn't be where it is. Like, and if it is high, it shouldn't be just to Malik Neighbors. I think Cam Ward, with Brian Daboll, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt, and what they have there. Also, we've seen, because they lost Andrew Thomas, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, their last game. So he's out for the season with foot after having foot surgery for the Giants, their left tackle. Keith, for me, is we've seen what Daniel Jones looks like when pressure gets to him. It's not good. Like he just doesn't look like the guy that you want to pay your money to. We see what Cam Ward has looked like. Miami's offensive line is solid, but they've given pressure, and he just knows how to navigate it, negotiate it, and still make plays. I think Cam Ward would be a very great fit for Brian Daboll and that Giants offense to be able to create explosive plays, and a guy that with his arm talent, with his arm strength, he is, to me, like, I think Shador is is a little bit more accurate than he is. I think he's the most gifted natural thrower of the football in this class by far. And I think putting him in that offense, you back safeties up, gives your run game some lighter fronts and everything. I just think Cam Ward would be a great fit in New York.
Yeah, definitely has good arm strength. I remember DP was in Cali, right? A couple years ago, and Cam Ward was there. I think that's when he was first, matter of fact, might have been first transferring from Incarnate Word to Washington State. And they always have like the big arm competition and things like that. And I want to say he won the competition. So
I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, live arm can throw the football at the end of the day, right? My perfect pairing, DP. I had this guy going to the Rams in my mock draft, right? And teams lose and things happen, right? Some teams win, some teams lose, and things get shaken up. I'm looking at the current draft order per Tankathon, right? New England doesn't need a quarterback, but Carolina needs a quarterback. Cleveland needs a quarterback. Tennessee needs a quarterback. The Jets going to need a quarterback. The Saints probably need a quarterback. The next step up, right? The next person is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm looking at them. I like Tetairoa McMillan there. And the reason I'm saying that is because I watched the early game, right? So I did the responsible thing Saturday and I woke up early Sunday, right? Watched the game Sunday morning, and I'm seeing the rapport that Brian Thomas Jr., right? And was something that you mentioned, Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence are having with each other at the end of the day. And I think it's a good situation. And I'm like, you know what? Like, because the thing is this, that Trevor Lawrence is not looking like what everybody said he was going to be, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, you paid him. It is what it is at this point. You paid him, right? He's not a bad quarterback. He's definitely not playing great football either.
Yeah.
So is he probably closer to Eli Manning than Peyton Manning? Yes, right? And so with those situations, you give him options, right? And they have a decent receiver core, but I guess what I'm saying is that give him another younger guy, right? So he can, like, hey, I have these two guys, almost like how Peyton Manning had, right? Like I had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Reggie Wayne to be able to throw the football too. And Tetairoa McMillan is another big body wide receiver, right? He's not 5'11", he's 6'3", 6'4", can move. And then now you have two interchangeable pieces with Brian Thomas, because even watching Brian, and shout out to their wide receiver coach over there, he looked like he's developing, right? I watched him, especially in the end zone. He was running a couple moves and stuff like that, running a couple routes, right? And he like got to the top of the route, had to adjust, had to sink his hips a little bit, and he's very aware of the sideline. Like, he's getting better, he's developing, and what you want to see. And it's like, hey, you throw Tetairoa McMillan in there, another big body guy, and he loves to play above the rim, right? Tetairoa McMillan, that he'd rather play above the rim, right? Like, he's a dunker, like that's what he wants to do. I think that could be a good situation.
No, 100%, man. I think, man, that's a dangerous combination to think about. You have Evan Ingram at tight end, Brenton Strange, who they drafted 2 drafts ago, and then you add 6'4", 215 Tetairoa McMillan, and you have Brian Thomas. And I'll never forget talking to one of my guys. He scouts in the NFC South now. He left LSU, and I talked to him about Brian Thomas, this past, during the draft season. He said, listen, he's a freak of nature. He does things at his size that you physically shouldn't be able to do. What I mean? Where it was sinking his hips. Like, he has such a high ceiling. He said, ceiling wise, he said I remember you telling me, he said the only guy I think has a higher ceiling in this wide receiver class is Marvin Harrison. He was like, I think this young man could be an absolute superstar. And putting him with Trevor Lawrence was the perfect thing, because Trevor needed that big body, explosive threat that can win at the catch point, but also win with speed. And putting Tetairoa McMillan opposite of that is a dangerous duo. Listen, I don't know what the Colts are going to do this offseason, but if Gus Bradley's still your DC, you don't want this situation happening, because you haven't addressed the cornerback position or improved your secondary in probably about 2 years right now. You could, if you walk into week 1 with Tetairoa McMillan and having to see, Brian Thomas Jr. with Trevor Lawrence, especially got Tank Bigsby running the ball hard now. I don't know what they're going to do with Travis Etienne. I think Tank Bigsby has earned himself a lot more leeway and carries in that backfield, even if Travis Etienne is healthy. That would make a very explosive offense, man. And maybe if you do that, Keith, we might see the Trevor Lawrence that people thought he was supposed to be coming out of Clemson.
Yeah, for sure. And I told you, I always move the threshold of, okay, cool, everybody's not Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady. The question is, could you potentially win a Super Bowl if you put the supplemental pieces around them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the truth is, I'm like, oh, well, that's an easy layup. And it's like, no, it's not, because every quarterback, you don't feel like you can, right? But I think Trevor Lawrence has enough tools, like naturally gifted tools, to be able to do that. But DP, let's keep this thing going and flowing, man. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the biggest draft storylines for the 2025 NFL draft thus far, because we halfway through the college football season. We have to talk about the biggest storylines.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch or an urge in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you placed your bets. You talk about placing bets. You can get in on the action right now at FanDuel Sportsbook on season awards live betting odds. That could change at any moment, guys. From MVP, offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year, offensive player of the year, so much more, guys. And listen, you name it, they have it. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, you'll get started with $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So what do you need to do? Simple. Go to FanDuel.com and get in on the action. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The biggest storylines after week 8 of college football for the 2025 NFL draft class. Keith, I think we have to stick with the big fish, and that's the quarterback class. And, coming out of the summer, this quarterback class took a lot of flack. Like, people didn't believe in it, things like that. Well, I'm going to say this, guys, you're not changing many minds right now. You're making a lot of those detractors, they can pat themselves on the back and say, listen, we didn't believe in you guys. This class is talented. Carson Beck, it's incredible to me to watch Carson Beck this year compared to last year. And I know Brock Bowers isn't there. Lat McConkey isn't there. I get all that. I mean, Marius Mims is gone. Like, the offensive line is not as strong as it was a year ago. But Keith, he had throws last year. Like, it was at a point where I was studying him last year. I was like, man, if he came out, he might have been my QB3. Like, the accuracy, the ability, and that's why I stick with the Jared Goff comp. Even though, yes, he just had a game where he threw 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. The way he plays, it still reminds me of Jared Goff. You know what I mean? So it's like, to see him and watch Quinn Ewers, and I know he took a heavy hit early in that game, but to watch him not move in the pocket, to watch him just stand there, and the tackles are doing everything they can against Michael and Jalen Walker. You got to help them out, because their task of one-on-one on the island against those two freaks is not easy, man. It's just not easy. And you didn't help them out. Jalen Milroe, the game against Georgia, it was like, this is what he could be. This is the superstar that he could be. And then Vanderbilt happened. South Carolina wasn't great. And then, against Tennessee's tough defense. And it's just like, what is going on? This quarterback class is leaving more questions than answers. And I think that's probably the biggest storyline, because anytime, Keith, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. People are going to compare this class, which we're going to talk about that on tomorrow's show, the strengths and weaknesses and everything of this class on tomorrow's show. But people are going to compare this class to 2022, when you had, from a quarterback standpoint, when it was like Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, what was it? Matt Corral, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder. Like, you don't want to be compared to that class. You know what I mean? You don't. I don't think this class has two legitimate guys with Cam Morton, Shedeur Sanders. Truthfully, that class didn't. You know, it was a lot of hope, projection, maybe, could be. This class at least has two guys where I feel like you put them in the NFL offense today, they can run it and run it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, obviously coming out, right? Like that's the biggest draft storyline is where do you go with the quarterbacks at the end of the day, right? And it's the two at the top, right? That have been playing the most consistent football in Shedeur and in Cam Ward, right? And then now the other three, right? And when we thought that there was going to be five getting pushed into the first round, the Quinn Ewers, the Jalen Milroe, and Carson Beck, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the inconsistencies. And I think the biggest thing that we're going to have to pay attention to, or as talent evaluators, right? What games do we take into what, right? And I think it's going to be what do people choose to make excuses for, and then what do people choose to make people like quarterbacks accountable for, right? And I think that's going to go back to it, and then it's going to go to the situation of like, hey, I believe in this guy or I don't, right? Because all three of those quarterbacks have had inconsistent moments, and it's going to be like, hey, why did they, right? Like that Jalen Milroe throw in the end zone, that to me, in my opinion, right, that looked like a timing situation with the wide receiver, right? Like the freshman wide receiver, even you could put it on Jalen also, right? That he took too long throwing the football, but a fade route, like the DB knows you only have but so much room to run, right? And so once you get two steps away from the end zone, he's going to turn around, right? Like you at the top of your fade route, and then Jalen's just throwing the football. Of course, the DB had time, right? That's a quicker pace throw, and I get it. You want to allow your wide receiver to throw the defensive back off and win, but your wide receiver has to understand too that he has to play with a certain tempo, and y'all have to be on the same page. That's a chemistry thing, but also you can say, hey, Jalen was supposed to know that, right? So it goes back and forth, and I think it's going to be situations like that, right? Like looking at Carson Beck, and then people are going to say, hey, what about the offensive coordinator? And are the skill position players that good? Like, is Oscar Delp really good? Or is Ben Yorsek really good? Or, you know, I heard, was it on SEC in the morning? I think it was SEC in the morning, I want to say, and it was just like Carson Beck has maxed out these players, right? These players have to step up because Carson Beck is actually the one that maxed them out. And Carson Beck just doesn't have any players to throw to. And I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that one at all, right? Like I'm kind of far off of that one, to be completely honest. So it's just different things, man. Quinn Ewers, people gonna look at his wide receiver core moments, injuries, is he healthy? Like, you know, the whole everything is gonna come up, but it's definitely surrounding those quarterbacks.
Yeah, and it's still plenty of ball left to be played, and it's still opportunity. Like at the end of the day, like you had guys start hot, right? It's like a basketball game. It's just a moment of runs because it's like, okay, you can start hot, but then if you get in the middle of the game in the third quarter, you're cold. Can you finish? Like, can you finish in the fourth? And I'm looking at these quarterbacks and saying, listen, I understand. Like, yeah, the middle of these last couple of weeks hasn't been great for y'all. But you still got multiple games down this stretch. You got the rest of this month, and you got the whole month of November. Plus, you know, Alabama, even though they got two losses. Now, that Vanderbilt loss was a terrible loss. You can't have that now. You can't, you know what I mean? I don't know where they are right now. I'm going to look.
I think they 15. Sure. I think they
15. Okay. So, like, they got some opportunities to move back up into that top 12, right? They got,
they still no. I mean, they like easily. Like the thing is, and it was funny. And you don't want to go to work with this. Like this is the optimism you have to tell yourself, right? But you know, if you're working at Bama, or if you're a Bama fan, but you know something don't look right because you still can say like, hey, we control our own destiny, right? Like we literally went out, we good because you got to beat LSU, knock them off. We got to beat Ole Miss, knock them off. I think they still play Ole Miss. You got to beat, I think Texas A&M, I believe, is on their schedule. You beat those teams that send towards the top of the SEC West. You're in a good spot, right? And then you're on the way to SEC.
They got Missouri. They got Missouri next. Then they go to LSU.
Yep.
And then they got Oklahoma, which that should be a wash because Oklahoma's not playing good ball. And then they finish up with Auburn. They got two back-to-back. LSU's ranked 8th, and then Missouri's ranked 21. Like, you got ample opportunity. Those two wins.
They don't even have Texas A&M this year. They don't play. Okay, well, that almost kind of helps them out, right? In the sense you don't have to play A&M, a team that looks like it's gaining momentum, right? It's headed in the
finding
right
themselves.
direction. Yeah, they're finding themselves, and you don't want to kind of be on that track, right? So yeah, I think they obviously they're still controlling momentum. I mean, control their destiny, but at the end of the day, it's like this don't look right.
No, and like I said, at the end of the day, like these quarterbacks, Carson Beck, you're gonna be in the playoffs. We expect. I expect Texas to still be in the playoffs. Now, whether Quinn Ewers is the starter or is it Arch, we'll see how this whole thing shakes out. I kind of trust Sark to stick with Quinn because he's like, listen, this is the quarterback that thinks like me. We're on the same page. Things like that. Like I expect him to go with the veteran, but you know how loud the fan chatter can get into the heads of decision makers, and there's like, you know what? Maybe we should go with Arch. You know what I mean? Just from a PR standpoint, not dealing with the backlash.
Yeah, Arch played. Was it because Quinn was injured?
Yeah,
Because I missed
early in
it.
the season.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I'm talking about in that
In the game.
Yeah.
They pulled him for like a drive or two.
Yeah, I didn't
and
know if it was because he was hurt.
I don't know what happened. It was just like they had to. I think he threw. It was right after he threw the pick.
Yeah.
I think when he threw that pick, they pulled him. Arch came in, played like a drive or two. He, trying to push the ball down the field. He used his athleticism, getting out of the pocket, got like a 21-yard run and everything. And I think after that, Quinn came back in, then that's when they started to make.
That's why it was. I didn't think Sarkisian would have made a rash decision like that and pull Quinn, because if you pull a guy and bench him, right, even in that moment, like you automatically tank his draft stock by 50 picks, 100%. Right? Like you just 100%. Automatically, you know what I'm saying?
He's not even declaring. He's coming back to school and transferring.
Something has to happen. And so I don't think Sark would have did that to him, especially it's the same guy that just walked you into Michigan, right, and walked you out of there with a blowout. So
true.
I didn't, but then also I didn't hear anything about an injury, so I was like, I didn't know what happened, right? And then the whole water bottle fiasco that kind of threw me off. That distracted me. That was confusing. But DP, let's keep this thing going, man. We know quarterbacks right is going to continue to be the storyline. Over here at Locked On NFL Draft, we're going to continue to monitor and give you the biggest updates, right, and give you our honest, true opinion after we watch the film and dive into the tape. But DP, coming up next is Dame's dudes, right? Put DP on the hot seat and then ask him, are these players in the club or is he kicking them out the club? My favorite segment coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. But if you're not a sports fan and you like concerts and comedy shows, they have tickets for all events. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, especially if you're going with the party or your family and there's multiple 3, 4, 5 people. You want to find seats that are consecutive side by side, and it's a hassle to do so, but Game Time Picks can help you. Also with Game Time, they show the views from all the seats in the venue, so before you buy your tickets, you know what vantage point you and your party will have. They have lowest price guarantees, event cancellation protection, and even job loss protection, guys. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot, for being our everydayers. Dames, dudes, who's getting into the club? Keith got 5 names. I'm going to decide whether they get the stamp or they got to get in that Uber and head back to the campus.
Yep, DP, let's kick this thing off. We're going to start with one of the guys we just finished talking about. Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. Is he in the club, out of the club, DP?
He got the win, Keith. Typically, when you win, you would think you can celebrate.
Yeah.
Not this week. You
know
what I mean? Yeah,
Carson Beck. He have to be left at home while the rest of his team.
Nah. Jalen Walker and Michael and Trevor each, they get in. They get the VIP, but I can't let Carson. Carson's got to, like we just talked about in the last topic, Keith. I still believe in Carson Beck, as a prospect.
Mm-hmm.
The tape he put out last year, that was legitimate tape. Accuracy, ball placement, just confident throws. I don't know what's going on right now. I don't know if it's Mike Bobo. I don't know, the loss of weapons, but 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And I get it. Texas has a good defense, but you cannot make some of the mistakes he's making as a senior veteran quarterback. Right now, no, he can't get in the club. Carson Beck's got to get it together.
All right, Carson Beck, you got to come back next week, babe. Maybe after you make it to the SEC championship game, right? I think
Maybe.
we'll return back to the club, see if you could get in. DP, Michigan tight end, Colston Loveland. Is he in the club, out of the club?
They lost to Illinois, and typically you can't celebrate after a loss, but I'm going to let Colston Loveland in because he was the only bright spot they had. 7 catches, 83 yards, and I think he's their leading receiver right now, and they don't know who their quarterback actually is. I don't know if me and you could probably go walk on and play quarterback for them right now. It's just been bad, but still yet for me, what I love to see in these situations, Keith, whether it's a receiver or a tight end, or sometimes even running back, are you QB proof? Right. And he's kind of proven like I've played with 3 quarterbacks. None of them have been good, but I'm still able to produce. I'm letting Colston Loveland in. He's the only reason that they even had like any type of offensive momentum, in my opinion.
DP, I'll tell you this, man. If I'm playing quarterback, the wide receivers are definitely going to be mad. Oh, because I'm running that rock, baby. I'm dropping back. I'm getting them back. I'm running. I am running. It is my time. You ever seen not Friday night, like
at White this thing?
Yeah. In any given Sunday, I'm steaming Willie beaming, baby. I am toting the rock, DP. So they're gonna be mad anyway. No receptions, no yards, and I'm gonna have 200 yards rushing. I am toting the rock, DP. It's my time to shine, baby. That's how it will be. Coming up next is wide receiver Nick Nash. Is he in the club, out of the club?
Man, I talked about him as one of my sleepers. I consistently talk about this young man. He's in the club, 10 catches, 98 yards. He had a receiving touchdown in the win over Wyoming. Like this young man can play, man. And I plan on like doing his profile soon over at Bleacher Report. 6'3", almost 200 pounds. Again, former quarterback, converted to wide receiver, and a guy that can play the big slot. He can play the X, can play the Z. You can move him around. But dude that can dominate the catch point with his leaping ability. And again, that former quarterback experience, he knows where to be, when to be at that spot. And I appreciate that with his game. So he gets in. I'm letting him in.
Okay. Yeah. And I like Nick Nash, man, what he can do. He's one of those guys that I think his name as the draft process goes, right? Especially, I think, after the season, right? Postseason, when it doesn't matter what team you're playing for, right? And then people are more focused on not who's the best team, but like who are the best players. DP, coming up next, man, we'll talk about wide receiver Savion Williams. In the club, out of the club?
Savion Williams, it's crazy. He had more rushing yards than receiving in this game against Utah. I didn't have that on my bingo card. He had 7 carries for 72 yards, but as a receiver, he had 5 receptions for 27 yards. Yeah, no, you're a receiver, so no, he's not getting in the club. I like Savion, but I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this TCU offense with him, because he came in as the big name, the big fish in this situation, but it's been Jack Bech pretty much all season. I like Savion, but can we flip that? Can we get 77 for 72 receiving and 5 for 24, whatever rushing? Can we flip that? He would have been in the club, but yeah, I need to, as a draft prospect, I need to see more as in the receiving game. I need to see them do more with him. He can't get in the club right now.
Okay, cool. Well, DP, let's wrap this thing up with quarterback Donovan Smith. Is he in the club, out of the club?
I feel like I'm gonna permanently ban him from the club, Keith. I don't even think there's an opportunity for him to ever get in. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't foresee it. He got benched, then he came back and he went 15 to 24, 173 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 4 sacks against Kentucky, where Houston lost 42-14. You know how like convenience stores or stores when somebody shoplifts, they put the picture up there and say, don't let this person there. No, Donovan Smith, like his picture is right outside the club right now. It's like, do not even let him in the line. Something has got to be figured out. I don't know what he's going to do in terms of draft prospect because it has been awful this year. And so, no, he's not even allowed on the premises.
Well, no, that's crazy, DP. And then you talk about, so we got what? Carson Beck was out, Colston Loveland was in, Nick Nash was in, Savion Williams was out because, and that might be play calling, DP, right? I feel like Savion, he might be like, hey, I just did what was best for the team, right?
He did, and I appreciate him for it.
And then Donovan Smith with DP. that wraps up Dame Dudes, man, and that wraps up another episode of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to end this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Listen, man, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube. Wherever you listen to podcasts, get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being on every day. And like I said earlier in the show, guys, on tomorrow's show, we're breaking down the 2025 draft class as it stands today. What are the biggest, what position is the biggest strength? What position is the biggest weakness? Are there any sleeper positions that have value that you need to know about? We'll talk about all that tomorrow. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.